Good evening. It's 8 o'clock in Yerushalayim, and this is WebYeshiva.org. It's time to begin our regular halacha shir. Our topic this evening focuses on the problems of Erev Pesach Shachalios b'Shabbos. When Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos this year, well, everyone knows that an Erev Pesach is an ordinary Erev Pesach, which doesn't fall on Shabbos, as in most years. It's a very busy day. I mean, there's a lot to do. And the complications of Erev Pesach falling on Shabbos are great. The great complications. We see on the screen the image of a beautiful challah, which I suppose is chametz. And the problem, of course, arises since you've already cleaned the house for Pesach before Shabbos, because mostly Shabbos is going to be Pesach, so the house is already cleaned for Pesach. You don't have your chametz utensils around anymore. Everything in the kitchen is kosher for Pesach. How are you going to eat? Where are you going to eat? How are you going to eat the challah, which is chametz in the Friday evening meal? And as far as the Shabbos daytime meal is concerned, it's prohibited to eat chametz on Erev Pesach after 4 hours in Yerushalayim. That comes around 10:30 or so in Yerushalayim. So the meal is going to have to be earlier than that. Let's see what the sources have to say about eating chametz on this Shabbos, which, in 2 weeks, Shabbos, which is Erev Pesach, and let's see what the poskim have to say about solutions for the problem. We begin with the Shulchan Aruch. Where is the Shulchan Aruch? Maybe here? Yeah, voila. Here's the Shulchan Aruch. And as in all of my classes, I'm not going to bother mentioning exactly where I take the source text from, because you have it exactly on the screen, the chapter and the paragraph number, if you want to check out the source and see what my typographical errors are. Shulchan Aruch, we're beginning with the Shulchan Aruch. What could be more authoritative than the Shulchan Aruch? The Shulchan Aruch says, Yud Dalet Shechalios b'Shabbos. When the 14th day of the month of Nisan falls on Shabbos, which is going to be this year in 2 weeks, that's the way it's going to be, Bodkim Leil Shlosha Asar. The examination of the house, the checking of the house, to make sure that there's no chametz in the house, has to be one evening earlier. Usually, b'dikas chametz, the checking of the house is done the night before Pesach. Now, it has to be done 2 nights before, not on Friday night, because not on Friday night, because it's not on Thursday night. You have to do it on Wednesday night this year with the candle and the whole works, just like you do it all every other year. You do it one evening earlier. And you even make the bracha, as the Mishnah Brura points out. You do it exactly as you would do it any other year, but 1 evening earlier. Meva'arin akol lefnei Shabbos, and you should make sure you have destroyed all of your chametz before Pesach. You shouldn't have any chametz left in the house when Shabbos begins. No chametz at all, except mishayirin mazon l'shtei seudot letzorach Shabbos. You set aside enough chametz, which could be bread for lechem mishnah, for challah, or other chametz items that you want to eat in the meal. You set the chametz items aside for 2 meals, Friday night, and the daytime meal on Shabbos. Sudah Shlishit we're going to come to, but that's not going to be with chametz. Sudah Shlishit is mana achar mincha. Sudah Shlishit should be eaten after mincha, and by then it's already prohibited to eat chametz. So the chametz that you set aside, typically challah and whatever else you want to have chametz for these 2 meals, that's only for the evening meal and the daytime meal. Sudah Shlishit falls at a time when you're no longer allowed to eat chametz on Erev Pesach. Az el yachol la'asoto lo b'matzah lo b'chametz. You're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, and you're not allowed to eat chametz at Sudah Shlishit time, because it's too late in the day. In Yerushalayim, the prohibition of eating chametz begins around 10:30, as I said. El b'matzah ashira, you have no choice. But for Sudah Shlishit, you have to have matzah ashira. There is no other choice for the third meal. Now, what is matzah ashira? You can buy it in the supermarket. Matzah ashira is matzah where the kneading of the dough was not done with water. The kneading of the dough was done with oil, eggs, apple juice or other fruit juice, anything which is not halachically water. And you can buy it in the marketplace. And of course, since you're going to be eating it for Sudah Shlishit at a time when it's already prohibited to eat chametz, you're going to want to make sure you buy matzah ashira, egg matzah, or whatever the brand is that you buy. You're going to want to make sure that it has a good hechsher, that has rabbinical supervision, which is satisfactory for Pesach. Now on Pesach, Ashkenazim do not eat matzah ashira. The Shulchan Aruch was, of course, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, and this is the Sfaradi position. Sfaradim, Poskei Sfarad, the great Sephardic authorities, have no objection to eating matzah ashira all Pesach long. Ashkenaz authorities, on the other hand, are dead set against it. The Ashkenaz team, they don't eat kidneys, they don't eat this, they don't eat that. Some of them don't eat gebrot. Well, one of the things that the Ashkenazim don't eat on Pesach is matzah ashira, but that's on Pesach. Erev Pesach, it's okay to eat matzah ashira, and therefore the Rav Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch thinks that should be fine even for Ashkenazim. The Sephardic authority thinks it should be okay also for Ashkenazim. Tzarich la'asota, and the third meal has to be done before the 10th hour of the day, because in the late afternoon you're not supposed to have a big Suda, because you want to have the Yom Tov Suda. Leil HaSeder is coming up in a couple hours, and therefore you have to have the Suda Shlishit as early as possible. Then the Ramah, the Ashkenaz authority, comes along and says, no, we Ashkenazim do not accept the lenient approach of the Sephardic poskim. The Medinot Eila, in these territories, Ashkenaz territories, Poland, Germany, Russia, all those Ashkenaz territories, Ein nohagim lechol matzah ashira. We don't eat Ashkenazim do not eat matzah ashira even on Erev Pesach. Incidentally, Ashkenaz poskim do agree that for people who have difficulty eating, sick people, elderly people, people who for whatever reason have difficulty eating, Ashkenaz poskim agree that there's room for leniency for them to eat matzah ashira. But for ordinary healthy people, no. So according to the Ramah, no, the Ashkenazim cannot follow the lenient practice of the Shulchan Aruch and use matzah ashira for the third meal. Yekayem suda shlishis b'minei peros o basa v'dagim. Forget about hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Forget about borei minei mizonot. For suda shlishit, just have fruits, meat, chicken, fish, all kinds of things which you enjoy but do not require hamotzi lechem min haaretz and do not require borei minei mizonot. Bottom line, according to Shulchan Aruch, this year you have to set aside chametz for 2 meals, and you'll eat that in the evening and the daytime meal. According to the Shulchan Aruch and Sephardic authorities, you can use matzah ashira for the third meal. According to Ramah, Ashkenazim don't do that. Our minhag, the Ashkenaz minhag, is to have Suda Shlishit with fruits, fish, meat, things like that. Now, in the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, they quote the Noda B'Yehuda. Noda B'Yehuda, Rabbi Yecheskel Landa, the great Rav of Prague, one of the 19th century, one of the all-time most influential Ashkenaz authorities, says, Ein ra'aya lePesach gufa le'erev Pesach. What is the minhag of the Ashkenazim? The Ramah just taught us on the previous screen that Ashkenazim don't eat matzah ashira on Pesach unless they're sick or elderly and have difficulty eating, and therefore the Ramah told us that Ashkenazim do not eat matzah ashira on Erev Pesach either. But Rabbi Yehuda says there's no proof of this minhag. Can't prove that so. Ad chatzot vaday mutar lechol matzah ashira b'Erev Pesach. On Erev Pesach, Ashkenazim are allowed to eat matzah ashira. It's not yet Pesach, and all of the chumrot, all of these super strict minhagim of the Ashkenazim, they don't apply on Erev Pesach. They apply only on Pesach. Hamoreh lahakel kol hayom afilu b'lo tzorech chola v'zoken. The moreh, the rabbi, who instructs his flock, the Ashkenaz rabbi, who instructs his flock that it's okay to eat matzah ashira on Erev Pesach all day long, lo hifzid is fine. We can accept that psak if that's what the local rabbi thinks is correct. If that's what the local rabbi thinks is the best thing for his flock, by all means, the local Ashkenaz rabbi can instruct his flock, it's okay to eat matzah ashira all day long on Erev Pesach, even if you're not sick, even if you're not elderly, even if you have no problem in eating. There is at least some need for this, for Sudah Shlishit. Bottom line, the Rabbi Yehuda sees room for leniency. Machloket, disagreement between the Ramah and the Rabbi Yehuda, the previous screen and the current screen. According to the previous screen, the Ramah teaches us that Ashkenazim do not eat matzah ashira even on Erev Pesach, unless they're sick or have difficulty eating. Rabbi Yehuda says it's fine. Now, everyone knows the rule of Safek Deraisa L'Chumra, where there's a disagreement amongst the authorities regarding a Torah principle. You have to be strict. You don't want to run the risk of violating a Torah principle. But where there is a machlokas poskim, where the great rabbis disagree on a rabbinic issue, safek d'Rabbanan lahakel, if it's at worst a rabbinic issue, then it's quite proper to be lenient where there is a machlokas poskim, a disagreement amongst the authorities. It's okay to embrace the lenient opinion. Well, all the more so is it acceptable to embrace the lenient opinion if it's not a Torah matter and not a rabbinic matter, but only a matter of minhag. All the more so does the rule of leniency apply where there is a disagreement amongst the poskim. And therefore, since the Rabbi Yehuda, one of the all-time greatest Ashkenaz authorities, is of the opinion that Ashkenaz minhag is lenient on Erev Pesach and permits matzah ashira all day long, there's no objection to embracing this lenient opinion. Pesach atzmo machmirim. Ashkenazim are strict and refrain from matzah ashira on Pesach, but not on Erev Pesach, unless, of course, you're sick, elderly, or have some difficulty in eating. Okay, that's the Shulchan Aruch, and that's the standard approach to understanding the Shulchan Aruch. Now we're going to take a look at a tshuva by Rav Moshe Sternbuch, originally from London. Today he's one of the heads of the Eidah Haredit in Mea Sha'arim. He is one of the leading poskim in the world today, and he, not surprisingly, embraces the approach of the Shulchan Aruch. And he, in greater detail, we're about to see that in greater detail and with greater explanation, he's going to teach us precisely what to do and what not to do in order to follow the instructions of the Shulchan Aruch. Here goes. B'leil Shabbos, Friday night, Mekadesh v'ochel b'pina, make kiddush and eat in some corner of your home. Choose some little corner somewhere where if you have a balcony, that would be good to eat on a balcony. But choose a little corner in your room where you're going to make kiddush and eat the Friday night meal. Yiched le'achol sham suda Shabbos, and that's going to be the corner in your home where you eat the Shabbos meal. After you finish eating, there's a birkat hamazon, of course. Minakeh b'makal gumi. Take a rubber spot. If you're familiar with how they clean floors in Israel, they use these sticks with the rubber on the bottom. You use this rubber gadget to clean the floor to make sure there are no crumbs from the meal left on the floor, because you were eating chametz. That's what the Shulchan Aruch said to do. You're eating challah. You're eating bread, which is really chametz. Sweep up the crumbs. Matzniya haperurim. Set the crumbs that you swept up from the floor. Set them aside. Leva'ara machar, and the next day you will destroy them. We're going to come later on. We're going to talk about how to destroy the remaining crumbs, how to destroy the remaining chametz on Shabbos morning. That procedure will come pretty soon. Lo yishtof et haritzpa b'mayim. Don't use water to clean the floor. Asur b'Shabbos. That you're not allowed to do. Just sweep up the any crumbs. That's the evening meal. Balokim. For the morning meal, for the daytime meal on Shabbos, it's going to be a morning meal because you have to eat early. He's going to explain why. Mashkimim, everyone has to get up early. Everyone has to get up early on Shabbos. Erev Pesach, the normal time for Shacharis has to be scheduled much earlier. Litpalel, you have to daven very early. Mimaharin, you have to daven quickly. It's not the time for chazanut. You want to be able to finish the daytime meal before the prohibition of chametz kicks in. And as I said, in Yerushalayim, it's around 10:30. Check on myzmanim.com, and you'll get the exact time in your town, or if you're some crazy place, you'll get the exact time in your latitude and longitude when the prohibition of eating chametz clicks in. You have to finish the meal by that time, which is in the middle of the morning, and therefore you have to get up very early. Everyone has to get up very early. The davening has to be very early, so you can get home and finish the meal before zman isur achilat chametz, before the time that it's prohibited to eat chametz. Bavo habaita, when you come home from the synagogue, Ochlim Suda Shabbos, you eat the Shabbos Suda in that same corner of your room, Mivachim Birkat Hamazon, and you bench. Then what do you do? Yesh medaktekim lahafsik be'emtza Suda. Some people are machmir. And this is something which he finds commendable. Some people are machmir, and the daytime Suda, they stop in the middle. You got up very early in the morning, you rushed to shul, you davened quickly, you came quickly home, no wasted time. Now you're eating the daytime meal early in the morning, early in the morning on Shabbos Erev Pesach, and you're mafsik, you break the meal in the middle. What does that mean? Levarech Birkat Hamazon. Eat half the meal, and then Birkat Hamazon. After you've eaten half of the meal, maybe just the challah and fish, or you decide what you want the first half of the meal to be and what you want the second half of the meal to be. But you begin with challah and fish, maybe some salads, and then birkat hamazon. Achakach, when you finish birkat hamazon, okri matzmam min hacheder, leave the room, leave the table for a short time. Go learn Rambam. Go study the laws of Pesach. Go do something else in a different location, not at the table. Notlim od pam yadayim, and now wash hands a second time to eat bread again for Sudash Lishit. So the daytime meal is broken in half. The first half is the daytime meal. Take a little interruption, go learn Rambam, go study Chumash, go do something, and then come back and wash again, say again, Al Natilas Yadayim, again, Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, and now you're having Sudash Lishit early in the morning on Erev Pesach. That's what you should do. Kain Minhag Abach V'Agra, that's what the great rabbis have done through the generations. Od Gedolim, that's what all the great rabbis have done to break the Shabbos morning meal in half. Yesh mafsikim karov l'chatzi shah. Some people wait half an hour between the first half and the second half of the daytime meal. That's what the Chazon Ish used to do. Hakol talui im yesh od maspik zman. The amount of time that you wait between the first half and the second half of the daytime meal depends entirely on how much time you have left until it becomes prohibited to eat matzah. In Yerushalayim, it's around 10:30. You'll check on myzmanim.com when the prohibition clicks in your location. Keep your eyes on the clock. You have to finish eating by that time, and that will dictate to you how much of an interval you can have between the first half and the second half of the daytime meal. Kamet Tzadikim, some of the great rabbis, lo hifsiku klal, said Birkat HaMazon on the first half of the meal, and then, without waiting, just washed their hands again. Some great rabbis just washed their hands again Natilas Yadayim, again Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, and the second half of the meal, the challah and the chulent or whatever, that's Sudash Lishit. Samchu al Sudash Lishit sheyochlu achakach. Some great rabbis don't do the breaking at all. You remember, on the first screen, the Shulchan Aruch told us that Sudash Lishit can be done with fruit, meat, fish, stuff like that. Some rabbis some rely upon the Shulchan Aruch. After all, relying on the Shulchan Aruch we can't object to that, can we? And therefore, some great rabbis who want to rely upon the Shulchan Aruch are not breaking the meal in half at all. They're just having the daytime meal, one meal early in the morning, and later in the afternoon after Mincha, they'll have Sudash Lishit, an abridged version of Sudash Lishit, only fruit and meat or whatever. Kol echad keminhago holech. All these minhagim are acceptable. Kol levavot v'doshim et Hashem. As long as in your heart you're striving to do the right thing for the mitzvah. It really doesn't matter exactly what the interval of time is between the first half and the second half of the daytime meal. It really doesn't matter as long as your kavanah is correct. You want to do the mitzvah correctly. It doesn't matter if you don't have a break at all, and you fulfill the mitzvah of Sudash Lishit without bread at all in the afternoon, just with meat and fruit. If you're vegetarian, it could be with cheese. If you're a pescatarian, it could be with fish or whatever you enjoy for Sudash Lishit. Okay, so he's given us instructions how to follow the Shulchan Aruch as far as the first meal Friday night and the second meal on Shabbos are concerned. Then, B'Gemara Suda, when you finish the daytime meal, you shake out the tablecloth onto the floor. Shuv minakeh, you clean the floor without water, just use some kind of broom. V'chol echad bodek b'kiso, check all your pockets. V'etzel yiladav, check all the pockets in your children's clothing to make sure that no one incidentally, unwittingly slipped some chametz into some pockets. Kelim meluchlachim mechametz, utensils, cutlery, dishes, serving dishes, anything which has chametz on it, because you just finished a chametz meal. Minakeh hetev be'etzba'o, use your fingers to clean it carefully, rinse it all off. Matznim b'makam shnit mina kelim, and then hide those utensils away in a place where you will not be using on Pesach. Matchil b'bir chametz, and now it's time to destroy any remaining chametz. And of course, there's a deadline for that as well, around an hour or so after Sof Zman Achila, around 11:30 in Yerushalayim. And again, myzmanim.com will tell you exactly the deadline for destroying chametz in your area. Myzmanim gives two opinions. Rabbis disagree about everything imaginable. There are two opinions about the deadline for eating chametz and the deadline for destroying any remaining chametz. There are two opinions. The first opinion, the earlier opinion, is that of the Magen Avram, which is not the most commonly embraced opinion. The common minhag in all Jewish communities is the later opinion, that of the Gra or the Balatanya. So in Ma'izmanim or on calendars, we have two times suggested for the deadline. It's the later time, which is the most common minhag, the most common practice. Yizael ligmora biur bitul lifnei shashisis. Keep your eye on the clock and make sure that you've finished destroying the chametz before the deadline for doing that. Now, how are you supposed to destroy the chametz on Pesach? In a normal year, if you live in a place where you're allowed to have open fires outside of the house, so you burn the chametz. The Mishnah and the poskim suggest crumbling it up and tossing the crumbs into the Dead Sea or something like that. Or crumbling up and then throwing to the air and let the air blow it away. Well, the various ways that we would destroy chametz on a normal Erev Pesach are blocked this year because it's Shabbos. What should you do? Zorek b'chatichot ktanot levet hakisei. Crumble up any remaining chametz and put it down the toilet. That's what he suggests. Adif mizrikas hayav. That's better than throwing it into the ocean if you happen to live at beachside. Im yesh eruv, if you're in a place where there is an eruv and you're allowed to carry outside the house, mutar lo tzil u'shuzarabim. You can take the chametz out of your house. Have kodem zman isur, as long as you do so before the deadline. You can't put it in your own personal garbage can, in your own dustbin that you own, but you can put it in a public place which belongs to the public and let the public worry about cleaning it up, either on Shabbos if it's a non-Jewish area or after Shabbos if it's a Jewish area. B'gemara biur, after you've completed the destruction of the chametz, typically by putting it down the toilet, then you recite kol chamira just as every other year, and all the members of the household should recite kol chamira and not rely on just the balabayit, not rely on just one person saying it. Everyone has the mitzvah of destroying chametz. Well, this is the approach of the Rav Moshe Sternbuch, following clearly the path laid out by the Shulchan Aruch, and this indeed is the approach of Rov Binyan. This indeed is the approach of mainstream poskim through the generations. In following this approach, you have to have lechem mishnah, of course, 2 loaves of bread, chametz, and if you don't have enough for 2 loaves, for example, you prepared only 2 loaves of challah for the 2 meals, Friday night and Shabbos day. So on Shabbos day, you're left only with 1 loaf. What do you do for the second loaf? You need lechem mishnah. It's okay to take a matzah, which you're not allowed to eat on Erev Pesach. Take a matzah, wrap it in a plastic bag, wrap it in paper, make sure it stays perfectly clean, and a piece of a whole matzah can be used for lechem mishnah if you need. Further, remember that all of the hachanot, all of the preparations for Leil HaSeder, everything that you're going to, and well, everyone knows a lot of work preparing for Leil HaSeder. There's a lot to prepare. That's why Erev Pesach is usually such a busy day in most Jewish households. You cannot do any of the preparations for Leil HaSeder on Shabbos. It all has to be done on Friday before Shabbos. Whatever your minhagim are, to have a roasted egg, whatever you use for a shank bone, whatever, salt water, it all has to use vinegar, use salt water, whatever you use, everything that you need for Leil HaSeder has to be prepared before Shabbos, with the exception of chrein, horseradish. If you're using horseradish, it is permissible to grate horseradish on Yom Tov. The reason is that grating fruits, vegetables, grating anything with a vegetable grater is permitted on Yom Tov if what you're grating is something which will lose its taste because it was grated too early. Something, like black pepper. You have a pepper mill to grind black pepper. Well, grinding black pepper a day or 2 in advance, it's not going to lose its taste. But black pepper begins to lose its taste only around a week or so after you grind it. Black pepper has to be ground in advance of Yom Tov, every Yom Tov. Chrein, horseradish, on the other hand, loses its taste very quickly, and therefore that you are permitted to grate on Yom Tov. You can wait until after Shabbos and grate that. Okay, at this point, we're going to turn to the other approach. The other approach, of course, contradicts everything we've learned up till this point. And now we're going to have the other approach. The leader of the other approach is Rav Moshe Feinstein in the Igros Moshe. As you know, Rav Moshe Feinstein was the greatest of the rabbis in North America, and of course, it's perfectly acceptable to rely upon his approach, which is radically different from everything we have seen up till now. Here is the suggestion of how to arrange the Shabbos meals on Erev Pesach, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein in the Igros Moshe. These are his words. The Inyan Isra Achilus Matzah be'Erev Pesach, of course, on Erev Pesach you're not allowed to eat matzah. That says in the Mishnah, it says in the Gemara, there's no machlok, there's no disagreement about that. Erev Pesach you're not allowed to eat matzah, so that you will enjoy eating it, you look forward to eating it as part of Leil HaSeder. Eich yasu elu she'ein rotzim lahashir chametz l'shtei sudat b'Shabbos shechal b'Erev Shabbos. This year, when Erev Pesach falls on a Shabbos, and you are a nervous person, you don't want to have any chametz in your house on this Shabbos, 2 weeks from now, on Erev Pesach. You want your house to be perfectly ready for Pesach. You don't want to have any chametz at all in your house, and it's just make you too nervous to have a corner of your room, like we learned before, a corner of the house where you're going to eat challah, where you're going to eat chametz on it's just too risky. You don't want to run the risk. Hine, Rabbeinu Rishonim Pligi im Isur Matzah hu kol hayom to Erev Pesach rak mizman Isur chametz. There is a machlokes about exactly at what point the prohibition of eating chametz. There is a machlokes about exactly at what point the isur of eating matzah on Erev Pesach clicks in. As you know, many Jews refrain from eating matzah already from Purim. They stop eating matzah. Some from Rosh Chodesh, Nisan, all different minhagim. Those are all minhagim. When does the isur, the prohibition of eating matzah before Pesach, click in? Different opinions. L'maisa besudas shachris, as far as the morning meal is concerned, af kodem arba sha'ot, even if you're eating the daytime meal early in the morning, asur lechol matzah. The prohibition of eating matzah surely applies to the daytime meal. Why? Kevan shel Rambam v'Ramban v'od harbe Rishonim asur kol hayom. Most of the Rishonim hold that you're not allowed to eat matzah the whole day of Erev Pesach. Besudas Arvis, as far as the Friday night meal is concerned, Kevan shel Rova poskim leka isur, most poskim hold that on the Friday night meal it's okay to eat matzah, and therefore ein limchot, we should not object. Ein limchot, we should not object. Be'elu shebishvil mitzvah sudas Shabbos yochlu matzah, we should not object to those who want to eat matzah on Friday night. Now you can tell from his terminology that he's not happy about it. We should not object. If we see people eating matzah on Friday night, we should not object. He's not happy with the idea, but there is some room for leniency, and therefore people who are doing it, we don't have to object to that. But for the daytime meal, no, definitely no room for that. Ra'ui lahachmir, even the Friday night meal, it would be correct. We recommend, we advise being strict on the Friday night meal, no matzah at all. Bottom line, better no matzah at all on Friday night or the daytime meal. That's better. Those who are eating matzah, taking 2 matzahs for lechem mishnah for the evening meal, we're not going to object to it, even though we're not so happy with it. So what should you do? How should you eat the meals? L'chein, tov la'ela she'en rotzim la'niach chametz al yom HaShabbos. Therefore, for those who don't want to have any chametz at all in their houses on Shabbos, Erev Pesach, for people who want to have a perfectly clean house already on Shabbos, and they don't want to have chametz, challah, any kind of chametz in a corner of the house, for people who don't want that, because they're afraid of what might go wrong, and especially if you have little children in the house, good grief, especially if you have little children in the house serving challah in the Friday night meal or the Shabbos daytime meal with little children, you're just opening the door for all kinds of disasters, especially with little children. Their crumbs can end up anywhere. Bottom line, what you should do is eat matzah ashira Friday night and Shabbos morning. Eat matzah ashira. You can buy it in any supermarket. Just make sure it has an acceptable hechsher, which is valid for Pesach. Then you know there's no chametz in it, and the crumbs don't matter. And for Friday night, you'll take 2 matzah ashiras. Again, the dough is not kneaded with water. It's kneaded with anything except water, oil, eggs, fruit juice, honey. That's matzah ashira, which normally gets the bracha borei minei mizonot, because if you knead flour with honey, with oil, with eggs, with fruit juice, you're making cake and not bread. Normally that would get the bracha borei minei mizonot. Kevan shekovea Allah the Shabbos. But since you're using this matzah ashira for your Shabbos meal, for the mitzvah of Shabbos meals, yitztarech levarech hamotzi u'birkat hamazon, you're going to need netilas yadayim with a bracha, asher kedishanu tzotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. You're going to need hamotzi lechem min haaretz. You're going to need full birkat hamazon for matzah ashira, even though all year long it would only be mizonot. Before Rush came to Beit Yosef, this is what Rabbi Yosef Karo teaches us in his encyclopedic commentary on the tour in his Beit Yosef. Kevan, Nachon Lasod came. These are the words of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. Kevan she'ein sipuk b'dei kol adam lasod matzah ashira l'chol shalosh sudot. Since most people cannot bake their own matzah ashira. Back in the days of the Beit Yosef, everyone was baking their own matzah at home. And back in those days, baking matzah at home was a difficult procedure. And having the people bake matzah ashira is even a more complicated procedure. We cannot lo itrachu rabbanim. The rabbis did not want to force the people, did not want to obligate the people. The rabbis did not want to require the people to bake matzah ashira in preparation for the Shabbos meals that fall just before Pesach. Well, this implies that although the rabbis did not want to require us to do it, you're surely permitted to do it. Just the rabbis thought it would be too much of a tircha, too much of an effort to impose upon the people, so they do not require, they do not demand matzah ashira. That's another way of saying if you want to do it, you're permitted to. And nowadays, when you don't have to bake it yourself, you could just buy it in any supermarket. Well, if you're in a Jewish area, you can buy it in any supermarket. Otherwise, you can, if you're not in a Jewish area, you can always order it online in advance. There are plenty of brands that make it with good hechsherim. Bottom line, according to Moshe Feinstein, it's perfectly acceptable, perhaps even better, to have no chametz. That means no bread, no challah, no chametz at all in the house on Shabbos. And for lechem mishnah, for your 2 loaves for the evening meal and the daytime meal, you'll take 2 matzah ashiras. חזינן שהיה ראוי לתקן להנהיג לבאר הכל לפני שבס. It's clear from the terminology, it's clear from the phraseology of Yosef Karo, it would be better not to have any chametz at all in the house, but we cannot force the people to supply themselves with matzah ashira, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch said, choose a corner of your house where you're going to eat chametz on Shabbos, but of course, eating matzah ashira is surely permissible, and perhaps even better. Kedei shelo yavo l'takala, choosing the matzah ashira route, as long as the matzah ashira has a good hechsher for Pesach, well, the worst that could possibly happen is there'll be some crumbs left over, maybe even whole matzah, maybe even half a box of matzah ashira will be left over, but that's not chametz. Just Ashkenazim don't eat it on Pesach, but Erev Pesach, go for it, and if half a box is left over, just put it aside and don't eat it on Pesach, unless you have sick people, elderly people in the household, people who have difficulty eating, if they could eat matzah ashira even on Pesach. Im yisha'er me'achametz l'kayem mitzvah sudas Shabbos ba'ashira ach lo hitruchu rabbanan. It's perfectly acceptable. We're just not required to do that. If Chazal, the great rabbis back in the days of the Sanhedrin, had been stricter, they might have demanded this procedure. Well, they did not demand it, but it's surely permissible, perhaps even commendable. But Ramosha goes on and says, Lachein, therefore, these are still his words, Le'elu harotzim ve'efshar lehem lahatriach la'afot matzah ashira l'shtei sudot. Therefore, people who want to have matzah ashira on Shabbos, and they can bake their own, or I just recommend buying it in the store, Ladif, it's preferable. This approach of using matzah ashira is preferable. After Suda Shabbos lo tzrichen lepat, even though Shabbos meals require hamotzi lechem min haaretz and birkat hamazon, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of a Shabbos meal, you are required to have hamotzi lechem min haaretz and birkat hamazon, but matzah ashira, which you're using for the mitzvah of a Shabbos meal, flips its bracha and becomes kavua, becomes hamotzi, and therefore it's okay. Calls that kodem sha'ashiris, but of course you have to eat the matzah ashira before the prohibition of eating chametz comes into play. Prohibition of eating chametz, again, around 10:30 in Yerushalayim. You'll check the exact time in your locality. When the prohibition of eating chametz comes in the middle of the morning on Shabbos, Ashkenaz practice is also to refrain from eating matzah ashira. So unless you're sick or elderly, you have to finish eating the matzah ashira by the middle of the morning, and you'll check the exact time in your local calendars. Look in the Shulchan Aruch, he says, Kodem sha'a asirit mutar le'achol matzah ashira b'tor pat. It's Shulchan Aruch says flat out, you can eat matzah ashira on Erev Pesach instead of bread, and therefore it gets the bracha, hamotzi lechem min haaretz and birkat hamazon, even though all year long it would just be mizonot. Aval la'achar sha'a asiris, but once the 10th hour has come, and you're no longer allowed to eat that, well, of course, you have to finish the meal before that. The Mishnah Brura says, this is quite a curious passage. The Igros Moshe, we're quoting a tshuva of the Igros Moshe, Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein in his tshuvas rarely quotes modern poskim. He was fiercely independent, and he almost always structures his tshuvas based on an analysis of the Mishnah, an analysis of the Gemara, the great medieval authorities, the Rishonim, the Rashba, the Rambam and Rashi and Tosafot, and then he draws his conclusions without consulting the modern poskim. He was fiercely independent as far as this is concerned. Occasionally, as in this particular tshuva, he quotes the Mishnah Brura from his own lifetime. The Mishnah Brura was published in the early 20th century, in his lifetime. It's my impression, I'm willing to be proven wrong on this, but it's my impression that in the few places where Rav Moshe Feinstein quotes modern poskim, as he's about to do at the end of this tshuva, he quotes the modern posek because it was part of the question that he was asked. He doesn't publish the questions, he only publishes the answers, but sometimes the person to whom the tshuva was written published the tshuva independently in some rabbinical journal. Rav Moshe Feinstein sent me this tshuva, and when the person who received the tshuva published it independently in a rabbinic journal, there you get to see the question. And it seems to me that in the few times where Rav Moshe Feinstein quotes modern poskim, he's quoting modern poskim who were referred to directly as part of the question. And since the questioner asked specifically about the opinion of the Mishnah Brura, so he opened up the Mishnah Brura and gives his opinion, and here it is. According to the Mishnah Brura, mutar le'achol matzah ashira kevan she'en yotzim ba'yedei chova b'layla, since you can definitively not use matzah ashira in Leil HaSeder, even if you are sick, even if you are elderly. For the mitzvah of eating matzah in Leil HaSeder, it has to be real matzah and not matzah ashira, and therefore, the Mishnah Brura says, that's why it's okay to eat on Erev Pesach. Bottom line, we have a big machlokus going here, two very different approaches. The approach of the Shulchan Aruch and many rabbis who, like Moshe Sternbuch, hew closely to the recommendations of the Shulchan Aruch. You eat chametz on the Friday night meal, you eat chametz on the Shabbos morning meal, keeping your eye on the clock to make sure you finish it on time. You clean the floors, any crumbs, anything which remains gets crumbled up and tossed into the toilet. That's one approach. The other approach is that of the Igros Moshe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, for those who don't wish to have the complications and the worries and the risks of eating chametz on Erev Pesach this year on Shabbos, especially if you have little children in the house, the way to go would be with no chametz in the house on Shabbos, everything cleaned and prepared before Shabbos, and Shabbos Sudas, you would eat matzah ashira, taking 2 matzahs for hamotzi, and then you don't have to worry at all about the crumbs. Just have to make sure you finish the daytime meal before the prohibition clicks into play. Now, at this point, let me give you the principal objection to Rav Moshe Feinstein's opinion. The principal objection to his opinion is the Ma'amar Mordechai. The author of the Ma'amar Mordechai was Mordechai was his name. Mordechai from the town of Crémieux in southern France, and this is an important sefer. This is a sefer which is quoted and relied upon more or less on every page of the Mishnah Brura. That's how important this sefer is. And he says, Barur, it's perfectly obvious. It's perfectly obvious that matzah ashira does not get the bracha hamotzi lechem min haaretz, does not get birkat hamazon, only borei minei mizvanot, and afterwards bracha achas mien shalosh ala michya. Perfectly obvious that those are the correct brachas for matzah ashira, even on Shabbos, which is Erev Pesach. Well, what's so obvious to him is just the opposite of Rav Moshe Feinstein's conclusion. Rav Moshe Feinstein said, you're eating matzah ashira for the Shabbos meal, netilas yadayim, hamotzi, birkat hamazon. Mama Mordechai says the opposite is obviously correct. If, for some reason, you're eating matzah ashira on Shabbos, Erev Pesach, borei min mizonot, and alamichia. Ra'iti la Rav Chida b'sifro Birkas Yimos. I saw it, the Chida. Rabbi Yosef Chaim David Azulai, 18th century, Hebron, just south of where I'm sitting now, one of the all-time greatest poskim, right up there in a level of authority similar to the Gra, the Gaon Mevilna. I saw that he wrote that on Pesach, Erev Pesach, Shechalius on Shabbos, like this year, he wrote that you should take matzah ashira, just like Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote. Rav Moshe Feinstein doesn't quote him, but Rav Moshe Feinstein doesn't quote any modern poskim. Yivarech Birkat HaMazon, and it's true that the Chida agreed with Rav Moshe Feinstein. Maybe the other way around. Rav Moshe Feinstein agreed with the Chida without actually quoting him. True, but I disagree. Yesh lachush lebracha levatala, saying hamotzi and birkat hamazon on matzah ashira runs the risk of saying incorrect brachas, using God's name in vain, in improper brachas. Ein l'smoch al zeh klal. We should not rely at all upon this opinion of the Birchei Yosef, which happens to be identical to the Igros Moshe. We should not rely at all on this idea of eating matzah ashira on Shabbos Erev Pesach. Since we hold that kneading the dough with oil, honey, fruit juice, eggs, anything, makes cake and not bread, it cannot be hamotzi lechem min haaretz, minag pashut gam be'erev Pesach. Therefore, we do not eat matzah ashira on Erev Pesach instead of bread. Ilu haya dat maran acharonim kedivrei achida. If the great poskim accepted this approach of the Chida, which is identical to the approach of the Igros Moshe, if people accepted this idea of eating matzah ashira for the Shabbos Suda, lo havashaske minei, they wouldn't have been silent about it. They would have mentioned it. If the Shulchan Aruch and all the other great poskim thought that it's a good idea to eat matzah ashira on this Shabbos, why were they silent about it? They should have mentioned this clever idea. Why is it only in the Chidah and subsequently in the Igros Moshe? Netilas Yadayim is also highly questionable. Well, you see that the approach of the Igros Moshe has its attackers, has people who are unhappy with it, and bottom line, you are going to have to make a decision whether to follow the poskim who adhere closely to the words of the Shulchan Aruch and eat chametz this Shabbos, or are you going to follow the matzah ashira approach of the Igros Moshe and the Chida? My guidance, my advice, my recommendation in deciding which opinion to follow is simple and straightforward. Man da'ovid kamar ovid, man da'ovid kamar ovid. Following one opinion is fine. Following the other opinion is equally fine. Ubilvad shetiya kavanato l'shem shamayim. As long as your motivation is l'shem shamayim, as long as your motivation in choosing the approach you choose is not to make your life easier, or not to make people respect you because you're such a tzaddik and so strict. If your motivation is to do the best you can to fulfill the mitzvahs of Shabbos and Pesach, if that's your motivation, then the opinion you've chosen is the correct opinion. If your motivation is some ulterior motive, that people should respect you for being strict, or just to make your life easier, you've probably chosen the wrong opinion to follow. What's important is that libo mechuvan l'shamayim. What is important is that your heart be directed to performance of the best mitzvah. At this point, I want to make a brief comment on a different topic, which comes up this year. In Eretz Yisrael, of course, we have 2 days back-to-back, Shabbos and Yom Tov. In Chutz La'aretz, it's 3 days back-to-back, Shabbos and 2 days of Yom Tov, which raises a question unconnected with everything we've discussed up till now, raises the question of showering. If it's a hot day, could be a hot day, you might want to shower. On Shabbos, there's no way to permit showering with hot water on Shabbos. But on Yom Tov, the rule is, on Yom Tov, you're allowed to heat water. You're allowed to use hot water on Shabbos. You're allowed to heat water and use hot water on Yom Tov for a purpose that is commonly used. People commonly use hot water to prepare food with or to drink. Therefore, you can heat up water to make coffee on Yom Tov. What about making hot water? What about using hot water to bathe with? I'll use a North American pronunciation. Well, what about using hot water to shower with on Yom Tov? In the days of the Shulchan Aruch, where people would bathe, they didn't have showers back then. When people would bathe rarely, remember, Shulchan Aruch lived in the days of Queen Isabella of Spain. Queen Isabella took 2 baths, 3 baths in the course of her lifetime. She had a bath the day she was born, she had a bath the day she got married, and she had a bath the day she died before being buried. That was Queen Isabella, who was the Queen of Spain back in the days of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. Well, back in those days, where using hot water to bathe with was extraordinarily unusual. Of course, heating water and using hot water to wash the body was prohibited on Yom Tov. It's not Shavah L'chol Nefesh. It's not something that everyone was doing. In the course of time, ordinary practices have changed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think nowadays no one would buy a house, no one would buy an apartment. I think nowadays no one would rent a house, no one would rent an apartment unless there were facilities in the house to take hot showers and hot baths. It's not only common, it's 100% universal nowadays. And this raises the question of whether the halacha changes in accord with common practice. And the answer to this question, as far as this specific issue is concerned, showering on Yom Tov, as far as this specific issue is concerned, it's quite clear that the halacha does change according to common practice. After all, back in the 17th century, when smoking tobacco products in Europe, pipes, cigarettes, was very rare, the poskim were agreed that it is prohibited to transfer fire to a pipe or a cigarette in order to smoke on Yom Tov. A century later, by the 18th century, when everyone was smoking pipes and tobaccos, sort of wonder what it is that they were smoking. Maybe not only tobacco products, they were smoking other stuff. But once smoking became so common in the 18th century, more or less universal, so the halacha of what is Shavah L'chol Nefesh, what is a common practice, changes, and the halacha changes as far as this question is concerned. The halacha changes accordingly, and therefore nowadays using hot water to shower with on Yom Tov is acceptable. Ashkenazim will not use a bar of soap, only liquid soap. Sfaradim can use solid soap as well. One must be careful not to squeeze any water out of the hair. I don't have examples up here anymore, but not to squeeze water out of the hair. Just let it dry by itself. And with these provisions, showering should be okay on Yom Tov, truly the second day of Yom Tov if you have 2 days in the Chutz La'aretz. With this, I'm going to pause and wish you a good week and a safe week and a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and look forward to seeing you all in the continuation of the Web Yeshiva. Until then, Shalom, Shalom.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Fink. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. That was great.
You're welcome.